Welcome to the deep dive. Usually when we talk about history on here, we expect this sort of, this solid, unchanging permanence, like granite.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
You look up a historical figure and you get this very neat list.
Right, exactly. You get a birth date, a list of major accomplishments, maybe a war they fought in.
Yeah, and the historian just sort of points at the textbook and says, here are the facts.
Right. But today, our mission for you is to completely shatter that granite. We are looking at a single, highly unusual source today.
It really is strange.
Yeah, it's just this brief, super casual text excerpt from an image, and it's simply titled John the Baptist.
Right, which sounds formal, but the text is anything but.
Exactly. We're going to unpack how this tiny, weird little artifact actually reveals the really brutal way society categorizes the human mind.
Also just the mechanics of everyday conversation, honestly.
Yeah, how our memories systematically delete facts.
Right.
And just frantically cling to vibes.
I mean, it's a fascinating artifact because it completely strips away all the academic padding we're so used to seeing.
Right.
We aren't analyzing a peer-reviewed paper here. We are analyzing a piece of informal text that just recounts a conversation the author had, quote, today with a friend.
And what comes out of that conversation is this shockingly blunt, incredibly half-remembered summary of a major historical figure.
It really is.
For you listening, I'm going to read the exact text we are dissecting today. It goes like this. Speaking to a friend today, I learned that John the Baptist was crazy and hated. He was not allowed to do something or another, I remember not. Regardless, he was denied on account of some or another defect of the mind. A defect that was truly a defect, and not something adorable, such as musical prodigy.
Yeah, I mean, it is just so dense. It operates on so many psychological levels at once.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because, it is immediately obvious this strange little text is not a history lesson.
Not at all.
It starts with this confession, right? Speaking to a friend today. So this isn't someone who spent a decade in the dusty archives translating ancient Aramaic texts.
Right. It's just someone passing along gossip they heard over coffee.
Exactly.
Which, if you think about it, is how the vast majority of human knowledge is actually transmitted.
Oh, for sure.
We like to think of history as something preserved perfectly in amber, but functionally. Functionally, history is just a giant game of telephone.
Yeah, the telephone game. That's a perfect way to put it.
And the author signals this perfectly right from the start by admitting an almost total failure of factual memory right there in the second sentence.
Right, where they write that the figure was not allowed to do something or another, I remember not.
Exactly. I remember not.
But, I have to push back a little on how we interpret that.
Oh, okay.
Like, is the author of this text really doing anything uniquely cynical here? Or are they just being, a normal human with a bad memory?
That's a fair question.
Because honestly, if I try to recount a deep dive I listened to yesterday, I'm probably going to say they talked about something or another too.
Right.
Our brains they really don't hold on to specific details like that.
Well, yeah, and you are touching on a very fundamental mechanism of human cognition there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it isn't that the author is intentionally being malicious or dismissive. It's actually all about cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
Right. So our brains are incredibly energy-intensive organs. They use up a massive amount of calories.
Right.
So to conserve energy, the brain ruthlessly filters out information that it deems, non-essential for immediate survival.
Or like social standing.
Exactly. The specific historical restriction, like what this ancient figure was literally forbidden from doing, is basically useless trivia to the author's brain in the modern world.
It doesn't help them survive today.
Right. So it just gets purged.
The facts just evaporate.
They do, completely.
Yes.
But what remains is the emotional resonance.
The vibes.
The vibes, exactly. The brain discards the architectural facts of the story, but it fiercely protects those social and emotional labels.
Right, like the what happened is gone.
But the who was this person and how did the tribe feel about them is crystal clear.
That makes perfect sense when you think about evolutionary survival, Like if someone tells me a guy in the next village got kicked out for eating the wrong berries,
Right.
I might totally forget the type of berry, but I will absolutely remember, hey, that guy is an outcast. Stay away.
Yes. You remember the social consequence.
Which brings us directly to the labels the author actually did retain.
Yeah.
Because they brush right past their memory failure with the word regardless And then they just go straight for the jugular.
Oh, yeah.
They say he was crazy and hated.
Just brutal.
Yeah.
And consider the cognitive efficiency of those two words.
Yeah. Crazy and hated.
Right. It bypasses the intellect entirely. There is no nuance. There's no historical context.
Right. No exploration of like first century socio-political dynamics in the Middle East.
Exactly. It is a completely reductive shortcut.
It is incredibly aggressive, too. Like, if you read a traditional biography, even of a highly controversial historical figure, the historian usually provides some sort of buffer.
Oh, sure. Academic distance.
Right. They might call someone a polarizing religious ascetic or maybe a radical visionary.
Right.
There's an attempt at neutrality there.
Well, neutrality requires effort. It really does. It requires the listener to weigh evidence and form an independent conclusion. But by deploying a label like hated, the author is basically doing all the cognitive work for the reader.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They are presenting a circumstantial reaction, the fact that society disliked this person as an inherent definitive character trait of the person themselves.
Let me bring in an analogy here, because this reminds me of something.
Go for it.
Think about how we talk about movies with our friends.
Okay.
Like, if you ask a coworker about a new movie that came out, and they just say, oh, it was awful and loud.
Right. You inherit that judgment immediately.
Yes. And if you ask them what the plot actually was, and they say, it was about something or another I remember not, you still walk away believing it's a terrible movie.
Oh, absolutely.
You have been handed a conclusion without any of the context required to make that judgment yourself. So is this artifact doing the exact same thing to historical narratives?
I mean, it is a perfect parallel. You are inheriting a decontextualized judgment.
Yeah.
When we consume information this way, whether it's about a movie or, a celebrity in the news or a historical figure, we are allowing someone else's emotional filter to entirely dictate our reality.
Wow.
We just accept crazy as a clinical diagnosis and hated as a justifiable outcome simply because it was delivered to us with such unearned confidence.
But, if we are operating purely on these cognitive shortcuts,
Right.
what happens when the author actually tries to explain the why behind that hatred? Because the text doesn't just stop at the name-calling.
No, it doesn't.
It attempts to justify the societal rejection in the very next breath.
Right. The author writes, regardless, he was denied on account of some or another defect of the mind.
Yeah.
And then they add this highly specific, very repetitive emphasis, they call it, a defect that was truly a defect.
Truly a defect. I mean, that phrasing implies a lot.
It does.
It suggests there are things out there masquerading as defects.
Yeah.
Right. But this one was like the real deal.
Yeah, the repetition forces us to pause and consider the threshold of societal tolerance, like what actually constitutes a true defect. Right. The text is drawing a very sharp line between mere eccentricity and fundamental incompatibility.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, a true defect, in this context at least, is a mental reality that creates profound, unmanageable friction with the surrounding world.
Unmanageable friction.
Right. It isn't just a quirky way of looking at things. It is a condition that results in a person being actively, quote, denied participation in society.
I want to play devil's advocate for a moment here.
Okay, sure.
Because today, obviously, we see a massive cultural push to destigmatize mental health, which is incredibly positive. But we also see this trend of almost romanticizing it.
Oh.
Like we rebrand severe mental instability as neurodivergence, or we frame it as like a hidden superpower.
Right, the troubled genius trope.
Exactly. We see it in movies all the time where the struggling genius is ultimately vindicated in the end.
Yeah.
So is it possible the author, by leaning so hard into the phrase truly a defect, is actually pushing back against that modern romanticization?
That is a highly compelling way to read it. The author might be refusing to sanitize the actual brutal reality of severe mental divergence.
It is brutal.
It is. Historically and honestly, often presently too, when a mind operates completely outside the accepted parameters of its culture, the result is not a quirky, endearing sitcom character.
Right.
The result is isolation.
Wow.
The author is acknowledging that friction. They are looking at the mechanics of society and concluding that the rejection wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It was the inevitable clash of a rigid social structure encountering a mind that simply could not conform.
So in a way, it is less about judging the individual
Right.
and more about just stating a cold, hard fact of human group dynamics.
Oh.
If you cannot operate the machinery of the tribe denies you.
Exactly. And that introduces the final, really the most piercing observation in the text.
Oh, the last sentence.
Right. The author defines what a true defect is by contrasting it with what society will actually accept.
Right, they define it by negation.
Yes.
The text says it was truly a defect.
Yeah.
And not something adorable, such as musical prodigy.
The shift in tone right there is just remarkable.
It really is.
The introduction of the word adorable introduces this incredibly heavy layer of cynicism. It completely recontextualizes all the preceding sentences.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because adorable feels, it feels dripping with sarcasm.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels incredibly condescending.
Let's analyze the actual edge of that comparison, though.
Okay.
By contrasting a true defect with a musical prodigy, the text is holding up a mirror to the reader's conditional empathy.
Conditional empathy. Wow.
Right. Society is perfectly willing to tolerate and even celebrate mental differences, but only under highly specific, highly transactional conditions.
So you basically get a pass for erratic behavior.
Yeah.
But only if you were producing something of immense value to everyone else.
Exactly. The history of art, science, technology, it's all littered with examples of that exact transaction.
Yeah.
We excuse the quote-unquote mad genius because we want the genius.
We want the product.
Yes. If someone's brain works completely differently, perhaps in ways that cause them severe internal anguish,
Right.
society will totally accommodate them, as long as their output is a beautiful symphony, or a disruptive piece of software, or a brilliant painting.
We call them special.
Exactly. We find their eccentricities adorable.
Because there's a tangible return on investment for us.
Precisely.
I'm thinking about how this plays out for, you listening in your own daily life.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine a modern workplace. You have this brilliant software engineer who is notoriously difficult to work with. Maybe they throw tantrums or refuse to follow any basic protocol.
Right. Everyone knows someone like that.
Exactly. And management completely tolerates it. They might even call it the price of genius.
Yeah.
Because that engineer ships code that makes the company millions of dollars.
Right.
But then you have an average performing employee down the hall who struggles with severe depression.
Oh.
They miss deadlines, they have trouble socializing at the water cooler, they aren't vibrant at meetings.
Yeah, the tolerance vanishes for that second employee.
Completely vanishes. There is no symphony being written, there is no million-dollar code.
And that is exactly the devastating subtext of the author's final sentence.
Wow.
We claim to be this highly empathetic society, but our empathy is heavily conditional on utility.
Yeah.
When a mental difference is purely a defect, when it presents as uncooperative social interaction or intense emotional volatility, or just radical behavior without producing a socially pleasing byproduct.
Society's underlying brutality just rushes right to the surface.
Instantly. The label shifts instantly from prodigy to crazy. The reaction shifts from accommodation to hatred.
So the author is essentially saying, we only like neurodivergence when it plays us a pretty song.
That's exactly it. They're calling out the hypocrisy of how we assign value to human minds.
Wow.
A true defect is simply a divergence that offers no entertainment or utility to the neurotypical majority.
Right.
And going back to the start, the author didn't need to remember the factual, historical details of John the Baptist's life because the facts weren't the point in the conversation at all.
The facts were irrelevant.
Completely.
Yeah.
The point was mapping the boundary lines of human tolerance.
It is wild how much philosophical weight is packed into those, 60-odd words.
It really is.
Because when you first glance at the excerpt, it just reads like a slightly mean-spirited, lazy summary of a figure from Sunday school.
Right. A throwaway text.
But when you actually apply the magnifying glass to it, it unfolds into this tightly wound argument about the commodification of the human brain.
And this is exactly the value of examining these casual textual artifacts.
Yeah.
Because formal academic essays, they have guardrails.
Right. Editors, peer reviews.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
They are carefully constructed to project objectivity and fairness. But offhand comments, text messages, casual summaries shared with a friend over coffee.
No guardrails at all.
None. They reveal the underlying operating systems of our culture. They show us the blunt instruments we actually use to categorize one another when we think no one is grading our papers.
So what does this all mean for us? Because, this deep dive wasn't really an exploration of historical theology.
No, not at all.
The excerpt we analyzed never intended to be a textbook. Instead, it serves as this incredibly uncomfortable mirror reflecting our own conversational habits.
It forces us to confront our own cognitive shortcuts.
Yeah. It shows us how eagerly we treat these profound, complex human lives as just fodder for quick chats. It highlights how efficiently our brains drop factual nuances while just desperately clinging to radioactive emotional vibes.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, it exposes how sharply society divides mental health into two distinct buckets,
Right.
right? The useful and adorable bucket, and the truly a defect bucket that earns you rejection.
It really is a powerful reminder that the way we summarize others says far more about our own values and biases than it does about the people we are summarizing.
That is so true. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to take away and mull over.
Yeah.
The next time you find yourself listening to a casual secondhand summary of a complicated situation, whether it's gossip about a coworker, a hot take on a celebrity, or a sweeping statement about a historical event, ask yourself a few questions.
Right.
What specific factual details have been conveniently dropped from the narrative? And what raw, emotionally charged labels are currently doing all the heavy lifting to shape your opinion?
That's a great question to ask.
Because as we've seen today, the line between an immutable fact and a cynical game of telephone is much, much thinner than we like to admit.